Welcome to First Time Watching. Over the years, we've had plenty of final girl horror movies, but Hush stands out because it leans heavily into Maddie's disability and uses it to amplify the tension in a way that feels both unique and deeply unsettling. In this video, I'll recap the movie and explain the ending, so please like, subscribe, and hype up the video as we dive into the movie recap of Mike Flanagan's Hush. In a cabin in the middle of nowhere, Maddie is cooking an amazing rack of lamb when her neighbor asks her if she can come by. Sadly, the sauce is ruined. She calls in the cat and waits for her neighbor, Sarah, to arrive. Maddie's deaf, can't speak, and is a writer. Sarah has just finished reading the book she wrote, and she absolutely loved it. But after stroking her ego a bit about her writing skills, her deaf people's smoke detector goes off. Maddie runs inside to turn it off, while Sarah rinses down the lamb. They spend the rest of the day together, and Sarah invites her over to have dinner with her and her husband, but Maddie declines. And as she walks off, she gets a text from a guy named Craig who misses her. That night, she sits down to write. She's thinking about the ending for her new book, but can't decide. So she FaceTimes Craig, but hangs up before he can answer. But then he calls her back. She doesn't pick up. Sarah slams into her door and is screaming for help. Maddie, of course, does not hear her. An arrow shoots into Sarah's back, and then a masked killer stabs her over and over. But Maddie doesn't notice. The killer is intrigued. He watches her through the window and knocks, but she doesn't react, so he drags Sarah's body away. Maddie's phone rings again. It's Craig, so she ignores it and sits back down to write. The door opens behind her. The killer enters her house. That's when her sister Max FaceTimes her, so the killer moves out of the way. Max checks in with her to see how she's doing, to talk about boy stuff and how the writing is going. Max sees something behind Maddie, but she tells her it's nothing, probably the cat. After hanging up, she checks, but the little furry fuzzball isn't there, so she opens the door to check if she's outside, but the cat doesn't come. Something feels off. She leaves the door open for the cat, puts on her coat, and sits back down to write. But then she receives a picture from her own phone. It's a picture of her, taken from another angle in the room. She gets up and slowly watches through the door, and there he is. She runs to close the door, and just beats him to it. He walks around the house to try all the doors, but they are all locked. So he stalks around the house and readies his crossbow. She runs to her laptop to FaceTime 911, but the killer turns off the power before she can call. Without internet, she can't FaceTime. She looks out of the window at how he slashes the tires of her car. She grabs lipstick and a flashlight and writes on her window. Then she shines the light on it. She waits for him to read it. It says, "Won't tell. Didn't see your face. Boyfriend coming home." He looks at her and takes off his mask and asks her to read his lips. He tells her she's seen it now. He knows she doesn't have a boyfriend. He read her texts. He can come in anytime he wants. He can get her whenever he wants. But he is not going to. Not until it's time, when she wishes she's dead. That's when he is coming in. But until then, they are going to have some fun. And then he backs off. Maddie goes to the kitchen to grab a knife and a hammer. And then she locks herself into her bedroom and closes the drapes. He knocks on the window to get her attention, but it isn't his hand. He's using Sarah's dead body to knock. She drops the hammer and slowly backs out of the bedroom, where she falls onto the kitchen floor. She grabs her car keys and tries the buttons, but she's too far away, so she unlocks the door and steps outside to set off the car alarm, and then quickly goes back inside. A killer runs towards the car as she runs to her bedroom to climb out of the window to Sarah's body to check if her phone is still in her pocket. The killer runs back and she closes the window onto his hand. He tries to force it open, but she grabs the hammer from the floor and jabs it into his arm and closes the window. He knows what she was doing and shows her Sarah's phone. Then he takes Sarah's earring and puts it in his pocket as a souvenir. She ignores him and walks back to the living room. The killer circles the house. He is looking for her, but Maddie does her best to hide from him. She slowly opens the door and sneaks outside. While he is patrolling around the house, she quickly hides under the deck. She tries to feel where he is walking and feels that he is above her. As soon as he circles the house, she makes a run for it. He shoots a crossbow bolt and misses, so during his reload, she decides to run back to the house. She runs upstairs so she can observe him from the high ground. She opens the window and climbs out of it onto the roof. She tries to be as quiet as she can be, but it's not like she'll hear it. She throws a light further into the forest, and he starts walking towards it, and then she quickly goes the other way. She climbs down, and an arrow flies into her leg. So she quickly goes back up. He starts climbing up as she pulls the arrow out and waits for him. When he arrives, she takes his bow and hits him in the face. He falls, and she takes the bow back with her into the house. She then goes downstairs to disinfect and bandage the hole in her leg. She looks at the crossbow. It takes a lot of strength to load this thing. He is watching her struggle when suddenly Sarah's husband when John arrives and knocks. Maddie, of course, can't hear him, but he immediately notices the lipstick writing on the window. The killer comes running with his flashlight and acts like he's a cop, telling him to get on the ground. John puts his phone down and reaches for his wallet so that the killer can ID him, and then he apologizes and asks him for help because the person who was in the house just ran off and stole his stuff, so he asks if he can use his phone so that he can call the sheriff's department, and then he acts like he is calling them. The killer asks John if Maddie might have a boyfriend or family nearby, but he tells him not that he knows. He just came to look for Sarah. He asks his phone back from the killer, so he gives it, but when he does, Sarah's earring drops from his pocket. Inside, Maddie is still struggling to load the crossbow. The killer asks if Maddie always was unable to hear. John answers no. Since she was a teenager, she got sick and lost her voice and hearing. John suddenly remembers that Maddie has a spare key in the flower pot, so the killer walks towards it to get it, while John grabs a rock and hides it behind his back. He waits for the right moment, but then Maddie knocks on the window, which distracts John, and the killer stabs him in the neck. John is on the floor, bleeding out, but he's a fighter. He grabs the killer and puts him in a chokehold. Meanwhile, Maddie goes out the back door and runs off, but the killer catches up to her and hits her with a rock over and over again. That was all in her mind. She reminds herself that she can't outrun him. John dies before he can choke the killer. Maddie's inside voice is telling her that even killing him with the crossbow might be too hard. Turning the power back on is impossible if you cut it. Hiding inside is a bad idea. Hiding outside, she already tried that. She is running out of time. Going outside means she's dead, and he has the advantage because he can hear her. She can't run. She can't hide. She can't wait. There is only one thing left. One thing he won't expect. She can fight outside. The killer is happy John died because he never would have won that fight. He wants to wait a little longer for Maddie to bleed out some more, in case her aim isn't as bad as he might think. And that's when an arrow hits him in the shoulder. She runs back inside, and he runs after her, but she drops an arrow and reaches back for it. He slams the door on her hand and breaks it with his boot, and then he closes the door and lets her lock it. He tells her he is coming in. She looks him right in the eyes. She takes some blood from her leg and writes on the window, "Do it." She challenges him. She takes some more blood and writes, "Coward." He walks back to get the car jack while Maddie goes to her laptop. He tries to break the window while she writes a description of the killer and tells her mom she loves her, and then she locks herself into the bathroom and waits with a knife in her hands. The killer broke the bathroom window behind her and is now sitting in the bath. She feels his breath in her neck, dodges his knife, stabs him in the side, and runs off to the kitchen. She lost a lot of blood and is losing conscious. She collapses on her way towards the knives. The killer stumbles into the kitchen and finds her on the floor. She sprays wasp killing spray into his eyes and then gets back up and turns on her obnoxiously loud fire alarm. He backs off and she tries to grab his knife, but he pushes her over and kicks her. She bites his hand, but he starts choking her. She pushes her finger into his arrow wound, but he doesn't budge. She tries to reach the corkscrew and stabs it into his neck just as she is about to die of suffocation, but he falls first. She goes into his pocket to get her phone and calls 911, and then she walks outside, sits down on the steps, and waits for the police to arrive. So, let's talk about that ending, because on the surface, it's simple, but thematically, it's kind of perfect. By the time we reach the final act, Maddie is done. She's injured, she's bleeding out, she can barely stand, and the killer has completely taken control of the situation, and then something shifts. Maddie, who is a novelist, starts rewriting the ending in her head. We literally see her visualize two outcomes, one where she keeps running and dies, and one where she turns around and fights. That's the moment the movie flips. This isn't about her suddenly getting stronger. It's about her taking control of the narrative. Instead of being the victim in someone else's story, she decides she's the author now. And from that point on, she stops hiding and hunts him. The killer made his biggest mistake earlier when he took off his mask. That wasn't just arrogance. That was him saying, "You're not surviving this." He didn't care if she saw his face because he never planned on letting her live. But by doing that, he stops being a faceless nightmare. He became just a man. And in the final fight, it's messy. It's brutal. There's no epic hero moment. She doesn't outmuscle him. She outlasts him. When she finally slits his throat, there's no big speech, because she understands something he doesn't. If she gives him 1 second of sympathy, she dies. There's no last-second rescue. No neighbor bursting in. No miracle. She survives because she adapts. Because she refuses to surrender the story. Director Mike Flanagan built the whole movie around that idea of agency. Maddie is isolated, deaf, physically emotionally overpowered. On paper, she's exactly who horror movies usually sacrifice. Instead, she writes her own ending, and that final shot of her sitting down outside as the police lights approach. It's not triumph, it's survival. And that's a wrap. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.